We've all heard of this mythical work-life balance, but somehow it's so much easier said than done. It's way too easy to keep pushing me time to the bottom of the list and end up working all hours and not getting round to quality time with your family. But stay tuned and I'll share some top tips for you to get the work-life balance that you're looking for. I'm Natalie Mayer, productivity coach at All in Good Time. I release a new video every Thursday to help you get more done more easily in less time. So if you want to increase your productivity, hit the subscribe button so that you don't miss any future episodes. Most of us are striving towards this thing we call work-life balance, but it isn't even as simple as that. It isn't even just two things that we're trying to balance out. That all-encompassing term life covers a multitude of things that could fill our days. We want quality time with our family, we want fun time with our friends, we want to focus on our health, fitness, well-being, and we'll have other hobbies and personal interests that we want to spend time on. On top of that, you might have a faith that you follow, or you might have voluntary commitments that you want to carve out time for. So how can you create balance between all those competing demands so that they all get some of your time and energy in a way that energizes you but doesn't overwhelm you? You may have heard of the phrase, there is time for everything, just not all at once. And the issue here is that we tend to live our lives one day at a time, and trying to squeeze in all the aspects of your life that you're trying to balance out into just 24 hours is just not doable. However, by just lifting your eyes to a slightly longer timeline of a week, it starts to feel more manageable. In a week, there are 168 hours. And even allowing for the fact that you probably want to sleep for 8 of those a day, and you perhaps want a couple of hours for showering, eating, etc. That then leaves you 100 hours to play with and plan with and balance out the different aspects of your life. Whereas when you're looking at just 24 hours, to squeeze everything in, there are lots of things that would have 15 minutes or 20 minutes or 30 minutes, not enough to feel like you're doing them justice. However, by looking across the week, instead of trying to fit everything into 24 hours, you can say, well, okay, I shall have my me time for a couple of hours on this day. I shall have social time for a couple of hours on that day. I'll do voluntary work for a couple of hours on another day. And suddenly you can see these pockets of time and it feels like you've got a lot more balance. However, to get that balance across the week, you have to put a bit of forethought into it to plan out what an ideal week might look like for you. Now, a lot of people resist this because they say, well, no 2 weeks look the same, and that's absolutely true. But it's amazing how much our weeks do have in common. And also by having that plan, one, we're more likely to spot those patterns, but also it stops us accidentally eating into what could be our me time or our family time, etc. If we're more intentional with our time, yes, we can choose to swap things around and adapt to each week, but it makes us intentional about moving some work time in what could be me time and then reallocating that me time elsewhere. So let me give you some guiding principles for creating an ideal week. The first thing to consider when designing an ideal week are your rocks, your pebbles and your sand. For those of you who haven't come across this idea before, the story is that there was a professor stood at the front of the lecture hall, and he had a big jar and he had some rocks, some pebbles and some sand. And he put the rocks in, gave it a little shake, they all settled down, and he held it up and said to the class, "Is this full?" And the class went, "Yeah, that jar is full." So then he put some pebbles on the top, gave it a shape, and they fell into all the gaps between the rocks. And he said, is it now full? And okay, yeah, fair enough, now it is full. So then he pours in the sand, again gives it a little bit of a shake, and the sand filters down and fills the gaps. And yes, there you go. Is it now full? Yes, it is now full. But the point of that is that if you do it the other way around, if you put the sand in first and then the pebbles and then finally the rocks, you won't get it all in there because the rocks won't have the gaps filled in by the smaller bits and pieces. So when planning out your week, you want to make sure you get your rocks in there before your sand. So your rocks are those things that really are priorities for you, that really contribute to your sense of well-being, contentment, etc. This isn't the little things like emptying the bins and running off reports, etc. But that's very often the way that we plan our lives. We sort of think, well, I'll get all these scrappy tasks out the way and then I'll be free to focus on the bigger tasks. And that's how they end up being squeezed out. Whereas if we do it the other way round, then we spot the gaps that are left and only do those smaller things in those gaps. So what are the rocks? Well, frankly, rock number one needs to be, because frankly, if you don't have your health, then none of the others matter. Second after that is probably family time or time for yourself, a combo of the two. After that, then you can think about putting work in there. And it's very often this order that's mixed up when we plan out on a daily basis. Work is the first thing that goes in, and then we think about whether we've got time left over for the other things. So when looking at your ideal week, think about how much time you want to allocate to each of the areas of your life, and then look at how you can jigsaw these together until you've got a balance that's right for you. To look at, if I increase my hours, what's going to give? If I decrease my hours, what's going to gain? If I want to be able to allocate this much to voluntary work, what else do I need to cut back on? And it's about finding the balance that's right for you. And it's really just about finding the balance that's right for you right now. In 6 months' time, you might come back to that ideal week and it'll have shifted slightly. It might be that in different seasons, work might be more important because it's a seasonal business, or it might be if you've got kids that during certain seasons, they're home more, you've got school holidays and you need to shift your ideal week. But it's having that intention about how you're going to spend your time in the week. Another reason for having an ideal week is Parkinson's law, which states that tasks will always expand to fit the time available. So if you don't have an ideal week in mind, then that never-ending list of things you could do for any of those aspects of your life, you'll just keep working down until you finish them. But of course you never do finish them because there's always new stuff adding on to the end. Whereas if you have set working hours or set an ideal number of working hours, then you're going to be much better at looking at that to-do list and prioritising what goes into your ideal number of work hours, whether that's 20 or 40 or 60, doesn't matter. It puts a time limit on it so that you have to be more picky and choosy about what comes off that to-do list, rather than allowing that to-do list to expand and expand beyond your ideal amount of hours. By having an ideal week, it also shows you how many hours you want for personal time or me time or family time or hobbies. And so if you are ever tempted to expand the work, it makes it much more obvious what the trade-off is. Whereas if you don't have that ideal week, there can be that temptation to just keep going, just one more task, because there's no sense of what it's displacing out of your day or your week. Whereas if you've planned out your week a little bit more, it's like, if I do this extra task in this category, I won't get to that category, and then I won't feel the balance. So having the ideal week means that you start to put time limits so that tasks don't just keep expanding. They can only expand as far as your boundaries. Next up, for creating that work-life balance that you desire, is looking at how you pace yourself. Because if you look at any one of those particular areas of your life, whether that's work or hobbies or health and fitness, there's probably 10, 20 ideas in each of those that you'd like to do. And so if you focus on any one of them and try to get all those ideas, it becomes overwhelming. But if you maybe look at over a year plan, and that's not the same as saying making a plan for the year, you can start to see how these things could flow across the year. So even just getting post-its and having January to December post-its, and then under each of those, you choose one work idea for each of those months, and one personal idea for each of those months, and one family idea for each of those months. So that on any particular month, instead of getting totally wrapped up with those 20 work ideas and squeezing out the other aspects of your life, you can say, okay, I only need to work on this one area of business, of work, because I can see across the rest of the year how those other ideas will follow. And the same applies to any of the other aspects. I can see that I don't have to do all my health objectives now. I can see how they can pan out across the rest of the year. And you can move those post-its around until you get a sense of balance within each month. The final aspect of work-life balance that I want to touch on in this video comes out of the work that you've done in those previous steps, in creating that ideal week, in creating that future planning, and that's that it allows you to be present in the moment. At the moment, a big reason why people don't feel like they've got work-life balance is because they feel like they're pulled in all directions all the time, and nothing gets significant time and attention. Whereas by carving out chunks of the week for different aspects, when you're in that one particular time slot, you can fully focus on it. And the reason for that is that there isn't a bit of your mind going, when will I get to this other stuff? I never get to this other stuff. It's not fair. Instead, it'll be thinking, that's fine. I can fully focus on work right now because I know that on Saturday afternoons, I'm going to hang out with the family. And on Sunday mornings, I'm going to have some time for myself. And on Wednesday and Friday evenings, I'm going to meet up with my mates. And then equally, when you're spending family time on Saturday afternoon, you're not thinking, oh goodness, I should be working, perhaps I ought to be working. You know that you've put in your ideal number of hours that week. And because Parkinson's law, you knew you had that time, you focused on your biggest, most important priorities so that they have been achieved by the end of the week. And you can have that family time fully focused, guilt-free. So what aspect of your life do you feel is missing at the moment that's not giving you the work-life balance that you crave? Put it in the comments below and share when you're going to commit to building that into your next 168 hours. If you found this video useful, then hit the like button so that I know to make more like this. If you want more ideas on work-life balance, on getting more done in less time, on productivity, then hit the subscribe button so that you don't miss any of my future weekly videos. In the meantime, check the description for the link to my 10 top tips to save an hour each day. If you want access to my productivity resource library that is exclusively available to my mailing list subscribers, you'll also find the link for that in the description.